science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower.
Evidence is evidence. It's public. Everybody can look at the evidence and assess it, and eventually, if there's enough evidence, come to the same conclusion.
The Chloe Sanctuary hopes to give you insight into the health and happiness of your companion parrots. We hope to help you build happy homes using reliable and proven tools. The best homes are built on a rock-solid foundation. And the best foundation for a happy home is the bedrock of science. When we stand on the shoulders of giants, the scientists who have worked long and diligently to understand our companions, we can reach new heights of understanding. And understanding is the key to success.
I think treated, most of these birds have a good prognosis, and I would say
What does avian veterinary medicine have to tell us about our feathered friends? How can the tools of behavior shaping make our homes happier for us and our companions?
Shake.
How can we deal with biting, screaming, or other misbehavior? What is it like to live among parrots? Let them roam around about you and share a life with them. The Chloe Sanctuary for Parrots and Cockatoos, a nonprofit charity dedicated to the empowerment of captive parrots and public awareness.
Hi, and welcome to Cockatoo, Cockatoos with Attitude. Episode 83, Back to Basics. How to make living with your parrot a win-win situation. Today we have with us Chloe, Lucy, Lorelei, Coco, Pippa, Peach, who's in the basket because she keeps trying to get to the floor, Sugar, and Salamander. It's a pretty big crew, don't you think, Pip? It's a pretty big crew. I did have Kaz in here. Unfortunately, Kaz and Chloe are not going to be able to be in the same room today. So Kaz had to leave. She was the one that started the issue, at least physically. There may have been signals I didn't see, but... So first, a little bit of housekeeping. All of our videos are now available as audio podcasts on Apple Podcasts, you know, what used to be called iTunes, and Spreaker, and also on YouTube. But if you go to YouTube, you've got to go to the folder that says audio podcasts, okay? The audio versions are in their own separate folder, and you won't see them unless you go there. We would appreciate it if you would give us a rating on your favorite service. Rate us on Spreaker, or give us a good word on YouTube, or on Apple Podcasts. I hope you'll give us a 5. The more ratings we have, more positive ratings we have, the more people will find out about us, and maybe more birds will do better, huh, Chloe? What do you say? You can also go to Amazon Smile. That's smile.amazon.com. And on Smile, you can choose someone that you're going to give. You can choose someone, an organization that's a nonprofit, that you want to give a little bit of money each time you buy something. It won't affect how much you pay for anything. So we'd appreciate it if you would do that. Just go to Amazon. Just go to smile.amazon.com and then put in Chloe Sanctuary when it says to choose the charity you'd like to give a little bit of money to. And that's all there is to it. Just be sure that you do that through a browser because it doesn't work through the apps on your phone. It only works through a browser, okay? Now, we have removed all the ads on YouTube. We do have, of course, we will ask you for a little bit of money as far as we have our little clips where we ask for donations. But all the other ads that don't have anything to do with us have been removed. That means we're going to lose anywhere between $300 and $500 a year. So we would appreciate it. That's Bob. He's having a problem today. We would appreciate it if you would sign up on Patreon and become a patron. Give us $1 an episode or more if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it, okay? But if you can afford a cup of coffee at Starbucks, we'd sure appreciate that you'd give us at least $1 an episode. This is not easy. It's a lot of work, being in a room with all these birds and trying to get ideas out to you guys is not easy, okay? So we'd appreciate a little help. And now let's talk about training. I'm going to stretch out so the birds can use my legs if they want to. You can even sit on my screwed up knee if you want. No? Pippa? She's determined to be the star of every episode, aren't you? Flap, 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 flap. That's okay. Everybody stop. That's okay. That's okay. Pippa's a good girl. Pippa's a good girl. Aren't you, Pip? Are you a good girl, Pip, Pip? Are you a good girl, Pip, Pip? Well, come here. Well, come on. Well, come over here. Come on, Pip, Pip. You can come to me. You can come to me if you want. Well, come on over. Come on over. There's a Pip, Pip. So we had Chloe, leave her alone. She's not hurting you, Chloe. Just be nice. Just be nice, Chloe. It's all right. This is a Pip. Our board member in Australia, fortunately, is home now. He had a ruptured appendix, and he wanted us to do an episode on back to the basics. So that's what this episode is. We're going to go through the basics of what we do to work with these guys. And the best and most successful technique used by almost every professional trainer is called applied behavior analysis. You know a little bit about it probably as a subset called reward training. But we do a little bit more than that, okay? And I'm going to go through those basics and try to cover everything in one session, along with all the other things we're doing. We have our little segments. Chloe, stop. Chloe, stop it. Stop now. Stop. Cover her face for a little bit. So don't be frightened away by the name, ABA or Applied Behavior Analysis. Don't let that frighten you. It's a name that comes from its scientific roots. While actually studying it and knowing it, in great detail, could take many years and many college credits. You can learn the basics of what you need to know in just a short amount of time. You just have to practice it, okay? Once you hear these techniques I'm talking about, be sure to practice them. It's important. Okay, I found that after learning just a few of these principles, I was able to start training birds almost immediately. That's not to say I didn't make mistakes. I did. Because I understood my errors quickly, because my teacher was great, Dr. Susan Friedman, PhD, out of the University of Utah, in her Living and Learning with Animals classes. I corrected most of my errors with very little effort. So after I changed my way of thinking, because you really do have to change your way of thinking, you're tending to see things in ways that are wrong, okay? We just do that. One humorous way is if you've ever watched John Cleese in Fawlty Towers, there's the one episode, Gourmet Night, where he's out kicking his vehicle because it won't start and saying he's going to thrash it within an inch of its life. We tend to do that. We tend to see things in the wrong way, okay? If something's not working the way we want, we tend to think, there's the problem. Where actually, in most cases, it's our ability to observe that is the problem. So one of the first things we have to do is to break that habit. And the first thing we do in that line of thinking is to stop labeling things. A bird isn't mean at all. If a bird is lunging at you or a bird is squawking all the time, then a bird is squawking or the bird is lunging. Hi, Peach. Speaking of about ready to sing, I think Peach is about ready to sing, aren't you? So we have to learn to like the bird that's no longer nesting, think outside that box. Our way of judging situations, people, birds, success and failure, was developed over time, mostly from the teaching of our parents, our siblings, our DNA, schools, and other associates, but there were other factors too. And this gives us a skewed view of the universe. So when we look at something, let's say a tree or a car or a perch, we're using a word that's a general word. Well, that's a perch, but that's also a perch. They're made by the same company, but they're not the same thing. Okay, they're not the same thing at all. Each one of them is broken in different ways and fixed in different ways, for one thing. So we don't see the independent nature of what we're dealing with. We say that's a tree or that's a juniper tree, but there are many different kinds of juniper trees. Look them up in a book. There are so many. There's short ones and tall ones and thin ones and ones that spread out. So we have to stop labeling things. It's not a mean bird. It's not a happy bird. It's not a bird that is sweet. These are labels that don't mean anything. It's a bird that has positive behaviors. And by positive behavior, I mean it's doing something in our world that's good for it and good for us. So that's the first thing. And we have whole episodes on these separate things, but the first thing you got to do is drop labeling, okay? So what does all this have to do with bird training? Well, my trainer, Dr. Susan Friedman, after she'd gotten her basic training, she went to a rescue and she misunderstood it. She had somebody who was in kind of a hurry and they told her, well, these birds over here are, don't go in there because they're dangerous, and these birds over here are all fine. So she went into the wrong room, and when the lady came back, she was holding 3 of these so-called terrible birds, these mean birds that you couldn't handle. So what she learned from that is the labels don't work. And if you walk into a situation without them, you can change things pretty amazingly. So the reason you're going to learn these skills is so that you can teach your bird to live in the world of humans. This is not a normal place to live for them. They were taken away from their mothers, put into an incubator, and then raised by humans. It makes them functionally autistic, and we have to work with them. And ABA was primarily used originally to deal with autistic children. So you do 2 things with it. One is you train them in new skills, such as how to spread their wings when they go to the vet, to be okay when they get flipped over if the bird has to do a cloacal examination, so that they can open their beak so you can look inside to make sure everything's okay in there. These are all things that you need. These are veterinary skills you teach. Then there's the other one where you have a bird that's screaming or a bird that seems to be lunging. You have to work with those functional misbehaviors. The reason we call them functional is because it serves a function in their world. Okay? Bob used to lunge when he was outside the cage because he got taken out so they could clean the cage and then shoved back in his cage. So of course he was going to do something to try to keep from going back in the cage. Living your whole life in a cage is no fun. So it served a function in his life. Everything they do serves a function in their lives, okay? So after you drop the labeling, the very next thing to do is to start looking and observing at the actual behavior. You don't have a bird that is angry, you have a bird that's lunging. Or you have a bird that refuses to come out of its cage. Whatever. Describe the actual behavior. When I put my hand near the cage, they back away from me. If I move close to them, they go to the far end of the perch. Other birds, maybe when you walk up, they come right to your side of the perch, but they may lunge when they do it. Okay, so look at the actual behavior. That's the first thing you've got to do. Now, there's a lot of terminology that would be confusing, so I'm going to try to avoid it. Okay, I'm going to use my own little phrases to make it easy for you to understand the different principles that we're going through. I will use some things like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. We're going to still use those terms. But when I get down to talking about dealing with specific types of functional misbehavior, then I'm going to use my own, okay? If you want to know what the technical terms are, just let me know and I'll send you something to explain it all. So what we're going to do is behavior assessment, which you could just define as sizing up how a particular action serves a bird. That doesn't sound too complicated, does it? You know, if a bird nips at you because it doesn't want to be picked up, well, what is the function? The function is to keep you from picking it up. If a bird comes to the cage door and stares at you, and when you open the door they jump onto your hand, well, the point of sitting there and staring at you at the end of their perch is to get you to open the door, right? So that's where the function comes in. We do actions for a reason, for a consequence. We work for a paycheck. We cook so we can eat. We drive to get to the movies. There are consequences everywhere, and it's the same with them, okay? There's ways to write all this down and detail it out so that you make sure you get everything right, but 9 times out of 10, once you learn it, you can do these observations on the fly, okay? When you see that something isn't working, then you can sit and pen it out. And there are forms that are free at behaviorworks.org where you can just download the forms and fill them out, and that'll help you. But let's talk about doing it on the fly. How to size up a behavior almost in one step. So, briefly, you ask yourself, why? Why is this parrot doing this? To escape? To get something? To get attention? That's the function, okay? What are they trying to get? What are they trying to get for their action? Is something in the environment stimulating the behavior? A new lamp? With Chloe, remember I talked about Chloe and the Rumford baking soda? When it was out, she just screamed. Put it up, she stopped screaming. So, is there something that's new in the room? Is there a change in the routine? Even just a little part of the routine. What are you doing when this behavior pops up, whatever it is? Is the reward they're getting or the punishment the same each time the bird behaves this way? I'm using punishment in the terms that you're used to hearing. We're going to use it a little bit different later.
We hope you will consider supporting us on Patreon today. We produce up to 2 videos a month. As a patron, you pledge to give us a donation, whatever you feel is right and meets your budget. Patreon gives us your gift monthly. You can easily set a limit on how much you donate a month. You can change the amount of your pledge at any time. Your gift will allow us to continue bringing you entertaining and informative videos. Patreon.com/Chloe Sanctuary. We look forward to your participation in Cockatoo.
let's say that if a bird opens its beak and leans forward, okay, you pull your hand away. Do you do that every time? Then maybe that's what the bird wants. They want you to pull your hand away. So you're going to have to work on them not being nervous about your hand or accepting your hand. The bird stops screaming if an almond is offered every time. So if you offer them an almond, they stop screaming. Okay, so these are what we call a consistent consequence. Okay, for everything that you, for every behavior, you're reacting the same way. A bird is screaming, you're giving them the almond. Okay, and then they're quiet. That's being consistent. So is the behavior a usual response to a particular event, condition, or situation? So when you come home and you open the door, do they always scream? Okay. When you go to the refrigerator, do they always make a sound? Okay, that happens. Roman does that. I go to the refrigerator, and for some reason he can't see this. The door is closed, and I take out the peanut butter. He seems to know. I've not figured out how he knows it, because he will always start going, "I love you, I love you." Does the bird always bite when the neighbor comes over? Runs away when the hand enters the cage? You get the idea. So once we have this guess why they're doing what they're doing, lunging when you put your hand in the cage, coming over to the cage, sitting at the bars, waiting for you to open the door, to get you to open the door. We're going to use that first guess, okay, as an assumption that the bird is acting this way because of that cue in the environment, that thing we're doing, okay? The next step we're going to do is use the tools of ABA to help the bird choose another behavior. Now, it's important too to remember that we don't have any psychics that can read these guys' minds. I know there are people out there say they're animal psychics. They don't really exist, okay? They may think that they're really psychic. They may think that they're reading the bird's mind, but they're only reading the actual body language of the bird. That's all anyone can do. The actual behavior, okay? Now, let's define something here. What is behavior? According to the Merriam-Webber online dictionary, the definition of behavior is, and I'm going to use the 1B definition, anything that an organism does involving action and response to stimulation. Okay? Anything an organism does involving action and response to stimulation. That's behavior. So, if you go, bang, and Lorelai's crest goes up just a little bit, and her eyes get a little wider, that's a behavior, all right? You turn her head like, why is he doing that to me? The response of an individual, group, or species to its environment. Okay, that's definition C. So we're going to focus on, and you're going to focus on anything that a bird does involving action and response to its environment. Rug cleaner. Peach, you're gonna fall. That's a beautiful song, Peaches. That's a beautiful song. Don't get down. Don't get down. Now, there's unconditioned responses, too. There's two kinds of responses. There's conditioned and unconditioned. If you train a bird to do something, or a bird learns to do something, that's a conditioned response. If you put your hand on a burner and that's hot, you don't have to think about it. Your hand comes away. That's an unconditioned response, okay? So we deal with those occasionally too, but for the most part we're dealing with conditioned responses, things they've learned to do. A conditioned response, a good example is an athlete, a marathon runner, bending over, a knee on the ground, waiting for that gun to fire, and as soon as that gun fires, they take off, okay? That's a conditioned response. 9 times out of 10, when we're dealing with training a bird, we're going to be giving them some kind of treat, okay? We've dealt with that before. We're going to give them some kind of treat. Some birds just like to be petted. Rome, sometimes he will be unhappy if you're offering him food when he just wants to be petted. And that's all it takes to train him, so... Poor Bob's just having a bad day. You can hear him crying in there. But he's real nippy right now, and yeah. We've got, looks like a good week for the aviary next week, so he likes being in the aviary, and he's been stuck in the sanctuary inside the building for weeks. When you're working with a bird, as far as training behavior like step up or targeting or that kind of thing, be patient, in a good mood. Don't train if you aren't. Train in an undisturbed area. Use a reward the bird enjoys, that you're only using in the training. Use short training sessions, 10 minutes or less. Don't train a bird who's not feeling well or is stressed. Choose another time. If the bird shows signs of frustration, go back and start over in an earlier step. If that doesn't work out, they still don't get it, have them do a behavior they know, like step up. And reward them for that, and give them praise, and stop and start at another time. You don't want them getting frustrated. Outcomes drive actions. Okay? And we would say behavior is a function of its consequences, but outcomes drive actions. So whatever the outcome is they're looking for is going to drive their actions. Whatever you do, don't trick or cheat the bird. Don't move a treat away when luring them to do a behavior. Reinforcement or punishment. Okay. Let me define these things quickly. Reinforcement is when you are strengthening a behavior, okay? So you're either maintaining a behavior at its current level or increasing a behavior. That's reinforcing it, okay? Punishment, the way we use the word, means to reduce or extinguish, to get rid of a behavior. Positive, something means you're adding something, and negative means you're taking something away. So if you have positive reinforcement, you're adding something in order to maintain or increase a behavior. If you have negative reinforcement, you're taking something away in order to maintain or increase a behavior. If you have positive punishment, you're adding something to lessen or extinguish a behavior. If you have negative punishment, you're taking something away in order to lessen or extinguish a behavior. Now, as an example of negative punishment would be taking away something to reduce a behavior. If a female umbrella cockatoo is constantly laying eggs, you might take away all nesting materials from the bird, okay? And stop petting them as much. See, you're taking away something to reduce or extinguish a behavior. If you were talking about positive punishment, you would be adding something. Maybe there's a toy that she's going to focus on, your bird's going to focus on, and you put it in the cage. Now you're adding something to reduce the other behavior. Reward training, most people have an idea about that. So if you have positive reinforcement, you're giving a treat to reinforce a behavior. In practice, we use positive reinforcement most frequently. And we're careful, extremely careful with positive punishment. And the reason for that is positive punishment will work. You've seen people hit a dog with paper after it pees on the floor. Whack! The dog will cower, and then it will eventually train the dog not to pee on the floor. But it won't do one thing. It won't train that dog to enjoy being hit with the paper. Okay? It doesn't make the dog any more likely to want to learn. All right? It doesn't do that.
Hey, Peach, are you climbing down? Are you climbing down, girl? That's a good girl.
When you're doing positive reinforcement, it helps them to develop a desired behavior the same way that a paycheck helps to get people up to go to work. Beautiful song, Beaches. A beautiful song. Yeah, you got over there. I'm not going to let you get on the floor, though, but I'm glad you got over there. And one of the core problems with punishment is it is positively reinforcing. It reinforces our tendency to use it again if we see positive results. So when you see that hitting the dog stops the dog from peeing on the floor, then your chances that you're going to hit the dog again are much higher. So we don't want to do that. It does not encourage these guys to want to learn. They don't take the negative punishment all that well. There are times when you have to use it. When I'm in the aviary and I've got birds that are trying to mate and I'm covered with birds, I'm going to use a squirt gun. Okay, I'm going to do it. That's positive punishment because I'm adding something to reduce or to extinguish the behavior. Okay? I'm going to do it. But it's the last thing in my tool chest. The last thing in my tool chest is positive punishment. Now, the other thing you use when you're training, you're consistent. What you do is stamped from a mold. You always hand the treat the same way with the same hand in the same manner. That's called consistency. Otherwise, they don't know what you're doing. Because you're doing everything different. They got to try to interpret your behavior. Just do everything like it's stamped from a mold. Like you're a robot that's been trained to just hand it the same way every time. Hand it the same way every time. Be consistent. You don't say step up one time and get up the next and here, hop up the next. Be consistent, okay? Always say step up when you're teaching step up, okay? Always give the same reward when the behavior is executed. Now, the only time that's going to change is if the bird loses its interest in that particular reward treat. So at that point, you'll have to change. And also, when you're rewarding, you should use something like good bird at the same time, because that becomes a secondary reinforcer. So it's also a bridge. Let's say you can't get the treat to them fast enough, all right? You say good bird and then get the treat to them as quickly as you can. That way they know when they hear that phrase, good bird, they've done what you want them to do and they're going to get their reward, all right? Otherwise, there's no way they can know that you're actually going to do it. What are they going to do, guess? They can't. So that will get it through to them that you're going to be giving them something for that they did the right thing at the exact moment. Now, the other key is when you reward a bird, it has to be at the exact moment they do what you want, which is where those secondary reinforcers, the good bird, comes in handy. Because if you're teaching a bird to step up, and that bird steps up on the perch, you get it up on the perch or you get it up on your hand, and then you reward them, you're rewarding them for sitting on your hand or sitting on the perch. You want to reward them from actually stepping up. So while they're stepping up, just before they get fully landed on your hand, you say, good bird. And they know that's what you're rewarding them for. Otherwise, you're rewarding them for standing on your hand. And it's not that they're stupid, they don't understand English. So you have to be clear in what you're doing. So it's important to be clear. Now, they have another word we use, it's called contiguity, but really what it means is keeping our ducks in a row. So you want one thing closely following another. And that means that the sunflower seed immediately follows the behavior. The treat follows the behavior, okay? And that secondary reinforcer, you hit them with it just at the moment. We also call it a bridge, okay? So, because you're bridging, on one side you've got the reinforcer, on the other side you've got the behavior, and you have to connect the two, so we have a bridge there. When we're talking contiguity, we simply mean that we want to have these things happen right together. We don't want to separate them. Contingency is another thing, part of the 3 C's. You only give the reward when the behavior happens, okay? In other words, half a sunflower seed is contingent on waving the left foot 2 times. You got to define what you want clearly, okay? You don't want to be wishy-washy about it because it's just going to confuse them. And you'll get lukewarm results at best.
Make sure your bird is comfortable getting up on a perch. Then, if you should have a problem, you'll have an easy way to get them back in their cage.
All the 3 C's should be present in order for a bird, or any animal for that matter, to understand what is required in order to receive its reward. Do everything in small baby steps. Don't expect them to make huge leaps. It's because we're not skilled. This has nothing to do with them. They're smart. But they have to try to figure out what we want. So if you want a bird to wave, you're going to start by just getting them to lift their foot a little bit. Now sometimes they may go ahead and bring up their foot and just wave it around. Just what you want. Give you the exact behavior. Then we do what's called flooding. You just give them a treat and praise and praise and praise. In other words, secondary reinforcers and primary reinforcers. Food, in this case, or petting, if that's what they really like. We make a big deal of it, okay, because they got it right in the beginning. That's how we capture behavior. That's how we capture the vocalizations we want. We want a bird to say hello. We keep saying it while they're paying attention. Eventually, someday they're going to say it. Then we're going to jump on it and reward it, okay? We're going to flood them with rewards. There's no other way to do it. Pete, I don't want you on the floor. Get up here. Get up here. Come on. Sit over here. There you go. You can sit up here. She was getting on the floor before, so I didn't want her up on it. I didn't want her up on the couch because she kept climbing down. But if you'll sit there, you can sit up here. Okay. She goes, yeah, sure, I'm close to this. And, no, you're not going to do that. Now, in the old days, we used to say, that I gave the dog the command and he sat. No, we don't do that. We cue. And by cue, it's like in the movies, okay? They put up a cue to do this and a cue to do that. Now it's your time to go on stage. That's the way we do it. So we use a cue, like I say, step up, and the bird steps up. Okay, the cue is step up. Or I have another one with these guys, which is to put my hand like this. I put my hand like this, and that means step up. Either one works. They know both cues. So we use cues, okay? Now, a point about one of the techniques, extinction. We almost never use it by itself. Extinction simply means to ignore a behavior. You aren't going to pay attention to it. The problem is that if you do that, you'll find in most cases that behavior will get worse. Because at some point, Peach, you can't have that. At some point, you're accidentally going to reinforce it. You're going to walk in the room when they're doing that behavior that you don't want, and you're going to reinforce it. And then it's going to be worse than it was when it started. So we usually use extinction not by itself, but with other things, okay? To define it, extinction is ignoring a behavior, not reinforcing it to reduce the frequency of that behavior. So you want to stop them from doing something, or you want to make it so they don't do it as much. And that's called extinction. So behavior shaping, teaching them to do something in little steps. Raise the foot a little bit, raise it a little higher, raise it a little higher, raise it a little higher, so you have the foot up, and then bring the foot down, then bring the foot up, then bring the foot down. Now you've created a wave, okay? That's behavior shaping. Trading behaviors. Basically, trading behaviors is reinforcing one behavior while reducing another, okay? So you're like putting them on a scale. We want them to say hello and stop screaming, all right? So you're going to trade that behavior. They have a cute sound that they make, and then they also scream. So you're going to reinforce the cute sound and ignore, or extinguish, right? You're going to ignore the other behavior. So here are the basic trading behaviors. Trading one for another. Training a bird to prefer a wanted behavior over an unwanted one. To take a pine nut from your hand rather than bite your finger. That's an example of trading one for another.
It is ignorance of Bob's nature that turned Bobaloo into a living gargoyle. Bob's would-be parents made a hasty choice and found themselves in living hell, torn between guilt and frustration. I have seen the joy in Bobaloo's eyes now that he has a new life with me as his companion. To see Bobaloo love and trust again is worth the effort of a lifetime. But, once again, Bob is heading toward the pain of separation. My heart nearly broke the day I discovered that he was heading toward a cloacal prolapse, that his life will be cut short. To find love and acceptance and then have it stolen away from you by failing health is too much to bear. We can slow the progress of his failing health, but we can't stop it. He will need several surgeries, and eventually, Babaloo will die. We want to give him the best possible life until that day. His surgeries will become progressively more expensive over time. Won't you please lend Babaloo a hand and donate to his medical fund today? Our donation button is on our webpage at www.chloesanctuary.org. Just be sure to say, "For Bob," in the notes when you donate.
Then there's one that I call the Chinese finger puzzle, which is, if you put your fingers into a Chinese finger puzzle, you can't do anything else with those two fingers while it's in there, right? So what we do is, if a bird tends to nip, we can get something like an almond. They love almonds. You put an almond in their beak, they're not going to nip you while they have the almond. Now maybe they'll drop it and come after your hand. You do something that makes it so that they can't do something else. And a good example of that is putting the almond in the beak, then they can't bite. It's coasting to a stop. This is a method to slow down behavior. Okay? So let's say if you got a bird that chews your clothing, and it just keeps doing it. Peaches is good at that. If you have a bird that chews your clothing, what you can do is every 15 seconds, let's say, if they constantly keep doing this and there's not much time between it, you give them a little treat. Okay? And eventually you stretch that to every 20 seconds, then every 30 seconds, and until you got it every minute. And eventually they're just sitting there waiting for a treat and they're not chewing your clothing anymore. And that's coasting to a stop. So you're just offering them something on a timed interval. They get that reward as long as they're not chewing. If they chew, you start over. Start counting 15 seconds again. And then eventually you can stretch that out. So essentially what you're doing is rewarding at direct intervals. When I'm saying 15 seconds, I mean you're looking at your watch. When 15 seconds is up, they haven't chewed, they get a treat. Now if they chew, you start over. You tell them no. Start counting to 15 again. Gotta have a second hand on your watch. This one I call building up steam. And what you're doing here is you want something to happen in rapid succession, okay? You want a bird that is slow to step up quickly, okay? So what you do in this case is you say step up, they get on your hand, step up, you keep doing this back and back, you just keep going back and forth. They've done it 5 or 6 times, you give them a treat. And you do it again, 5 or 6 times, whatever, give them a treat. So what you're doing is repeat, and then treat. By doing it one right after the other in quick succession, you can teach them to do it faster because they want that treat, so they're going to hurry up and get it done. Any port in a storm is another. That's the reinforcement of any behavior, okay, other than the one thing you don't want them to do, okay? So if they've been squawking and they stop squawking and they do something else, you give them a reward, okay? If they have been chewing on your clothing, we'll use the same example. You can use the same thing here. Any port in a storm, they're not chewing, so you give them a reward. Okay, they're over in that spot where they normally chew, they're not doing it, you can just give them a reward that's not so much on a schedule. So what you're doing is rewarding any other behavior than the one you don't want. You don't want them to scream. You don't want them to chew your couch, whatever. So I call that any port in a storm. And the reason for that is you reward anything. It doesn't matter. You're in the middle of a storm. You're going to go to any port, right? It's the same here. So just reward anything else other than the behavior you don't want. So those are the basic techniques. I ran through them rather quickly. We have dealt with all these in other videos, but I wanted to kind of run through the whole thing. And there's 2 types of training. There's the one you got them on the perch and you're teaching them a new behavior. To target, to go after your hand, okay? You're teaching them to step up off the perch. You're teaching them to step on the perch. You're teaching them to wave. You're teaching them to do high five. Whatever you're teaching them, that's on the perch. The other type is when you're dealing with functional misbehaviors. Things like screaming, lunging, going to places you don't want to. You notice when we're in here, I mean, there's cameras everywhere. They're not touching them. Once in a while, Pitbull will try to go after a camera, or Bob will try to chew on the bottom of a tripod. But the point is, they've all been trained that way. It's a function. Hi, sweetie, that's my ear. What do you want? She'll grab my ear when she wants something. What do you want, baby? That's my Luce. That's my Lucy. And those are the techniques that I use. Of course, there's also the environmental stuff. You want to make sure they have the toys they need to play with and toys they can tear apart. They want to have as much freedom as you can possibly give them. So the aviary is good for them when we can get out there and it's not raining and cold. So that's a quick run through of all the basics. All that I can think of in a short time. And thank you very much for watching. And I hope this helps you guys with your working with your birds. Please consider becoming a patron and donating at least $1 an episode. Find us out on Apple Podcasts or Spreaker or even YouTube. We do have audios on YouTube now in the audio separate playlist. And we'd appreciate it if you would use smile.amazon.com and set us as your primary charity. And thanks again for watching. Who wants to say goodbye? Come on, Pip. Come on, Pippa. Pip, Pip, Pip. Say goodbye, Pip. Pip, 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 Pip. Good girl. It's a good girl.
We welcome your feedback on our videos. We look forward to your insights, tips, questions, stories, and pictures. You can email us at cockatoo@chloesanctuary.org, reach us on Twitter @Chloe Sanctuary, and join with us on our Facebook Chloe Sanctuary page.
Science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower.